A phone rings. Trump answers, listens for a moment, then slams it down. Scott Bessent has just issued a threat, not with missiles or trade embargoes, but with math. Any country buying Russian oil through China, he warned, will face a 100% secondary tariff. This wasn't a backroom whisper. It was a loud, clear announcement broadcast from the US Treasury live on CNBC. With a single sentence, Bessent transformed a bilateral trade conflict into a global compliance ultimatum, not just aimed at China, but also at India, Germany, the G7, and any country brokering energy deals through China's industrial infrastructure. 8 hours later, the Yarlung Tsangpo River roared to life. 5 newly synchronized hydroelectric dams in Tibet surged to full capacity, generating over 300 million megawatt hours, 3 times the output of the Three Gorges Dam. Beijing didn't flinch, it flipped a switch. According to Bloomberg, those dams alone will produce more clean energy than all of Poland. This wasn't a reaction. It was a coordinated response. A geopolitical sanctions threat met with a geoelectric counterstrike. Per Reuters, China now imports 2.2 million barrels of Russian crude oil daily, a 16% increase year over year. Iranian imports, also under US sanctions, have quietly grown as well. Beijing isn't hiding this, it's expanding it. Yet, from Bessent's perspective, this isn't legal trade, it's collusion. He paints the entire supply chain as complicit. Oil flows into China, chips come out to the world, and now he wants Europe to join in blocking it. The contradiction is glaring. Washington claims to protect the global order by threatening it. Meanwhile, China's position is clear. In an official statement to the South China Morning Post, the Chinese embassy in Washington called US sanctions illegally extraterritorial, insisting that trade with Russia and Iran complies with international law. They argue no third party is harmed. That logic is defensible, though not immune to criticism. Energy is fungible. Oil redirected to China still funds sanctioned regimes. But the principle China invokes, sovereign trade, is the same one the US uses to justify its own global commerce. And this is where the pressure tightens. Bessent's strategy is evolving. He's no longer focused solely on tariffs. He's pushing for the G7 to coordinate and effectively wall off China's entire supply chain. Not just sanctioning direct trade with China, but penalizing countries like Germany, France, and Italy if they don't fall in line. The Wall Street Journal reports that the EU exports over $67 billion in vehicles and $130 billion in pharmaceuticals and metals to the US every year. In contrast, US exports to Europe total just $70 billion. The leverage isn't balanced. It's tilted in America's favor, and Bessent knows it. He's using that imbalance as economic leverage. Some might call it blackmail. But here's the twist. China doesn't ship everything directly anymore. According to Bloomberg Economics, 70% of Chinese exports to the US are now rerouted through third countries like Vietnam, Mexico, and even Canada. These transshipment routes blur the true origin of goods, masking Chinese value add behind foreign labels. To close that loophole, Bessent is proposing blanket tariffs on entire nations, not just for importing Chinese components, but for failing to reject them. If this plan is enacted, it could threaten over 2.1% of China's GDP and severely damage allied economies like Japan, South Korea, and Mexico. This unraveling of global supply chains wouldn't come from bombs. It would come from customs forms. And the contradictions grow. In targeting China, the US would raise prices at home. The Congressional Budget Office has already confirmed that American consumers paid billions more due to Trump's earlier tariffs. That money went into government coffers, but it came out of household budgets. And this brings us to another paradox. Tariffs, designed to protect American industries, end up hurting American demand. A 30% import tax on Chinese goods sounds tough, but as the Financial Times reports, it's US consumers, not Chinese exporters, who shoulder most of the cost. The Treasury collects the money, but the public pays the price. This isn't accidental. It's baked into the system. In practice, tariffs function like domestic taxes disguised as punishment for foreign nations. Meanwhile, Trump's latest tax plan adds another $3.4 trillion to the U.S. deficit over the next decade, according to the nonpartisan CBO. Most of the benefits go to corporations and high-income earners. In contrast, programs like Medicaid, food assistance, and renewable energy credits are being cut. By 2034, an estimated 10 million Americans could lose health coverage. Yet this same administration claims it's protecting working families from global competition. The contradiction isn't ideological, it's structural. Let's reset the logic here. The US is demanding that China stop buying oil from countries the US can't stop itself. To enforce that, it's threatening its own allies, who are essential to counterbalancing China's rise. Punishing them risks pushing them closer to Beijing. In trying to isolate China, America may end up isolating itself. And during all this, China is building. The Yarlung Tsangpo Dam network isn't a metaphor, it's literal power. According to Chinese state planners, these dams will produce over 300 terawatt-hours per year, nearly one-third of all Europe's wind and solar output. This power doesn't just fuel factories, it powers chip foundries. In May 2025, Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, visited Beijing. His goal? To secure access to China's massive AI market, still the largest in the world. AI chips don't run on ideology, they run on electricity. And China's grid is scaling faster than any in the West. In 2024 alone, China produced over 10,200 terawatt-hours of electricity, more than double the US, according to the IEA, and they're not stopping. Massive hydropower expansions, solar farms in Xinjiang, and aggressive nuclear development are rapidly increasing capacity. By 2030, China could have the world's cheapest industrial power. That's a quiet but powerful advantage. Cost. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, China invested over $890 billion in green energy in 2024, more than the next 10 countries combined. Their strategy is straightforward: dominate energy costs now to control global manufacturing later. While the US writes sanctions, China builds turbines. One side wields paperwork, the other rewires the planet, and the markets are responding. Chinese cement, steel, and grid companies have seen their stocks surge by 30 to 70% since January. Traders are gearing up for a surge in domestic Chinese spending tied to dam construction and large-scale industrial upgrades. Iron ore prices are rising, and steel rebar futures have hit 6-month highs. This isn't market speculation. It's real capital being deployed through concrete government stimulus. Beijing's spending is already moving through signed contracts. Now compare that to Washington's approach, threatening tariffs on goods rerouted through Vietnam. If those tariffs go into effect, they risk harming US allies and driving up inflation at home, without actually slowing China down. Why? Because the true decoupling isn't happening at the border. It already happened in power generation. The US designed the global trade system, and now it finds itself trying to sanction the very model it created. Even the semiconductor narrative reflects this contradiction. Washington tried to block China's access to high-end chips, yet according to Bloomberg, domestic production of AI accelerators in China surged in 2025. They're not competing head-to-head with NVIDIA just yet, but they're scaling rapidly. And what they lack in raw power, they make up for in sheer volume. As one US analyst told the Financial Times, it's like watching someone build a slower Ferrari, except they're building 10 million of them. Meanwhile, China's economy grew 5.4% in the second quarter, outpacing every G7 nation. That growth came largely from sectors like electric vehicles, robotics, and 3D printing, industries powered by low-cost energy and strong state coordination. In contrast, the US economy shrank by 0.3% in the first quarter. The outlook for the second quarter is still unclear, but a looming government shutdown and rising interest rates are already putting pressure on credit and investment. This isn't about political ideology, it's about math. The Congressional Budget Office estimates that Trump's tax bill cuts revenue by $4.5 trillion over the next decade, while only reducing spending by $1.1 trillion. That leaves a $3.4 trillion gap. When interest is factored in, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget warns the real cost could reach $4.1 trillion. In simple terms, America is borrowing against its future to fund trade wars in the present, while China invests in infrastructure to shape the next decade. And there's more at stake. Analysts at Bloomberg Economics estimate that targeting China's export rerouting through third countries could wipe out up to 70% of its exports to the US. But there's a catch. This move would also disrupt $300 billion worth of trade with US allies. That's collateral damage in a strategy that, so far, hasn't produced clear wins. Meanwhile, China continues transforming its energy dominance into industrial strength. And here's the deeper contradiction. The US is demanding that China follow trade rules that Washington itself no longer consistently honors. It calls for fair trade while rewriting trade laws. It criticizes foreign subsidies while passing tax reforms that primarily benefit the wealthy and weaken domestic demand. It punishes China for using Russian oil while continuing to import aluminum from countries buying the same oil. And somehow, that's framed as leadership. In the end, Bessent's real opponent might not be China. It could be time itself. By forcing a confrontation now, he's trying to delay a shift that's already underway. An energy-driven transformation of the global economy. China's turbines are spinning. Its GDP is rising. Its factories are preparing for a world where tariffs don't define trade, but scale does. The West can sanction products, but it can't embargo capacity. Let us know what you think in the comments. We're glad you're watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Timefold channel.